All right, on today's video we got 3 overlooked scouting tips for you guys. Number 1, looking at water and water level. Number 2, overlooked food sources that are way back in the woods that most folks don't think about. And number 3, tracks. We're gonna get to them right now. Hopefully you enjoy it.
Water, especially the water level. We're out here, me and Zach are scouting right now, and it's early July, and we're looking at this little ditch that's full of water right here. It runs quite a distance down through this real thick bedding area. And right now, it's probably 5-6 inches deep, but if we get a couple heavy rains this fall and this thing comes up a foot or so, I can get a kayak or a boat of some kind in this ditch, and I can take this way up in there for access purposes. Because right now, I could probably put my hip boots on and I could wade up it, but that would take me quite a while to get where I'm wanting to get to. And we're hunting in a flat bottomland scenario right here where you really need any kind of topography that you can get, even if it's just a few feet in elevation difference. So paying attention to the water level and as it changes throughout the year is real important. This particular ditch, I think I can fit my little canoe in, especially if we get another 6 inches to 2 feet of water. Got a little trolling motor for it, or my boat paddles obviously. I can get in that sucker and slide in here real quiet with deer bedded just within 20-30 yards of this canal. I can go right past them. But on the flip side, if it droughts and we don't get a lot of rain this fall and we come in to hunt this spot and notice that this ditch is drying out, we can get in the ditch then and just walk up it. As you can tell, we're talking about 3 different scenarios there basically. It's like if we get a lot of rain, we're gonna need a boat. If it's just like this, we're gonna need hip boots to go up it. And if it's dry, well, then we can just walk right up it in our hikers, but keeping an eye on that water level is gonna make a difference. This is just one of many examples. I mean, we look at the water level on lakes and rivers and ponds and stuff too, because deer really like feeding in the riparian area where that water level changes, turkeys as well. And if you get a dry year scenario, they'll use the edges of those riverbanks often for traveling. Like if you look, this is kind of an example right here, I guess. If you look right in here to our left, it's real thick, just a wall of crap. And deer they'll go through that night and day. But if this thing dries out where they can walk this is the path of least resistance. They'll drop into this ditch and they'll use it to get from A to B. It could be a perfect little corridor for a buck to walk up and down. I don't think he's gonna do it right now because there's a foot of water in it, but if it dries out, I definitely could see a big buck using this as a travel corridor to move in between these bedding areas undetected.
We just spotted a real nice buck right down this slough about 100 yards away. Try to get to that tree. If you can get to that tree right there and then stand up, you can probably, yep. You gotta go quick though, buddy. You gotta get down and go quick.
Well, I just snuck up there real fast and kind of marked him like Aaron said, so I knew where he was at. Snuck along that bank, just popped up over that hill, and immediately when I popped up over, I seen him right there. He was just quartering too hard. If he'd have been turned or just standing there, I'd been able to take the shot. He was so close, but just quartering too much. He just kind of walked off back into those willows again, didn't even know I was there, but that was pretty sweet. Never been that close to that big a buck before, just like that. But that wind, you know, that wind just helps you sneak all right along in there. Can't even hear you.
And obviously, if you're dealing with a river system of some kind, water comes way up and there's trees floating down the middle of it, you're not going to be able to go out there safely with your boat. On the flip side, if it dries out and the water gets so shallow that you can't get your boat and prop in there, then that becomes a problem. So getting out here, putting boots on the ground, and assessing each one of these water access situations is going to be important, especially during the summertime like this. But me and Zach are going to drop some pins on this. We're going to keep taking this canal out. We haven't seen any obstructions down it so far for the last 400 yards or so. But that's another thing we're looking for, is if there's a downed tree or two in it, you know, up towards the access, and we miss that in our scouting, we come in here to hunt in the dark and we run into a giant deadfall or we can't get our boat around it, well, that just screws up our whole hunt. So lots of little overlooked details like this that I never used to think about until I actually got out here to hunt, and then had lots of these obstacles basically ruin the hunt for me. So we're putting in the legwork now so we don't get flustered later.
Think about that.
Probably a good one. All right, on this next tip, I'm going to talk about finding overlooked food sources next to bedding areas, which if y'all followed us for any amount of time, you know we love to hunt bedding areas and the edges of them. So I'm not always focusing on like a big ag field for a food source or a big food plot or something like that. We're often looking for these little overlooked pockets of food that are real tight to security cover, where those deer will feel comfortable coming out in during daylight. We just come through this patch of like pin oaks and red oaks down through here, and we jumped a little buck right here in the edge of this thick stuff. Like we're going out here into a field like a CRP grass field with a bunch of other thick multiflora rows and crap, and that deer was bedded right there in the edge of that. But right here in the transition between that bedding and this stand of oaks, we've got a line of trees right here that are bigger. This is a big pin oak or red oak. I don't know exactly what that is.
Pin.
It's a pin. This is a bigger pin oak. I see several other big pin oaks right there in the edge behind it. And I don't know why, but in the edges of these transitions, a lot of times there's old fence rows there. It may just be the edge of a woodlot, but often the trees are bigger and healthier along that edge. And these trees right through here, I've been looking up in the tops of, looking for acorns that might be growing that are going to drop in the fall, because we got a bunch of old ones right here underneath it. But I mean, that buck was just bedded 50 yards from us. If these bigger pin oaks are carrying a bunch of acorns and we can time it right in the fall where they're dropping, we can slide in here and we can hunt this transition as those deer come out of that bedding area. Because what they're going to do in deer season, especially a big buck, he's going to come out of that bedding area 50, 60 yards over here, and he's going to stand underneath one of these big trees and feed until it gets dark and he's able to go on out to the big ag fields at night. So if you're set up way back in these open woods, you might see them, but if it's early in the year, these things, they just don't move very far during daylight. So you might see him, but if you're bow hunting, you might be SOL too, because he's just going to come out here in the transition in the edge of that bedding. There's acorns on the ground here. There's also a bunch of blackberries in here. Ow, that's thorny. I'm not even going to pick that up, Zach. That hurt my finger. Bunch of blackberries in here. Looks like this might have been burned at some point in the last year or two. So there's lots of forbs, lots of blackberries and other stuff that the deer are feeding on. I can see where they've nipped off some of this little woody browsing through here. So even if these acorns aren't dropping, they still may use these trails and come right through here, nipping on these forbs as they're going out to those ag fields. It's little subtle food sources like that that we're looking for, little spots to target. And if I found, like in this transition, if I was to come across a big white oak, which is kind of an oddball tree in this mass of red oak woods, and that thing was loaded up with acorns, I'd really watch that. Because if they get to a point this fall where they're targeting those white oaks and there's only one of them right there, that's going to pull deer from a bunch of different directions. That is the one challenge when you've got a long transition like this with lots of bedding on one side, food on the other. They could pop out anywhere, you know, along the transition feeding. And if we're in a situation like that, we're going to start checking these trails for tracks. And that's what I'll talk about next. All right, we found some tracks right here coming up this transition, and they're walking like this. But then we saw a few tracks right here that peeled off, and they're taking a trail right up into these oaks. Probably going up in there to feed on that browse and stuff before they go out to the ag fields.
But if you start looking at the details of these tracks, they'll tell you a lot. I mean, some of these right in here have got a bunch of debris in them. They're almost dull looking, and they don't have real sharp edges on them. These tracks look like they were left before the last rain, and it hadn't rained here for a week or so. So these tracks are probably over a week old. However, these right here have got sharper edges in them. It's a small deer. It looks like a doe or a fawn, a yearling of some kind, not a big buck, I'm assuming. But it's a smaller track and it's got sharper edges in it. And if you're faced with that scenario that we were just talking about a few minutes ago, where you got a big transition with lots of bedding on one side, and you're hunting with a bow, you're trying to get deer within 20 yards, but you've essentially got all this bedding and all this food source with the oaks. But if you go down and you pick along these trails until you find one that's got a big set of tracks coming and going, that's what we're looking for. And often it's just one set. I mean, a couple years ago, me and Jake got in the edge of a bedding area and we found one big set. That's it. It had just rained though, like 2 days before that.
Got a big track right here. I see a fresh rub about 15 yards away. And this is the field that I'm anticipating the deer to be in and around the base of it. Whoa, 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 big buck. Right here, right here, right here. No, he doesn't know we're here. He's walking right at the water. Right at the water. We're ditching the stands right now. Giant. Yes. We just spotted a giant buck. We're going to kill him. We gotta ditch these stands. Stand up. He's right over my shoulder. He's feeding right here at 30 yards. See him? Easy, 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 easy. Don't move, Jake. Don't move. You see him on the camera? You got him. He's moving to the left.
Found one big set of tracks. It was coming and going in and out of there. 50 yards later, we saw a huge buck, and I just about killed him. I messed it up, but I mean, it was a heck of an encounter. And I'm assuming that was that buck's tracks. It might not have been, but regardless, that told us that there was a buck using that bedding area, at least in the last day or so. Scouting transitions like this during hunting season, we've had that happen numerous times. Me and Ben one time went in blind to an area. We could not see tracks, but we were going along the edge like this, and we come up on a lone white oak that was kind of sticking out off of the side of the transition. And I didn't even notice if there was acorns underneath it, but it was kind of an odd tree. And I found a fresh pile of deer poop right there. There wasn't a lot of sign, but we just posted up underneath that tree. 5 minutes later, I look out there and there's a huge buck that just stood up out in the bedding, and he's coming right for that oak tree. But there was just that one little bit of fresh sign in both those situations I just talked about. Well, the one was tracks, the other was droppings, right in the transition. Sometimes that's all you need. I mean, especially if you're getting on into October after the bucks have kind of busted out of their bachelor groups, it may only be one deer that's leaving that sign, but it may be the deer that you're trying to kill. So if you're looking at these tracks, look for tracks that aren't worn in like these, that are before the rain. Look for the sharp edges, and if you're looking for big ones, most cases a huge buck, big bodied buck, is going to leave a big track. Not every time. They're all different, but very often if we find a huge track that's coming and going and it's a walking track coming out of a thick area and into a food source like that, we're going to pay close attention to that. And I guess before I let y'all go, I might ought to talk about walking versus running tracks a little bit. And I'm not the best at this. It seems like if you spook a deer and you see it take off running across a field or something, someplace where you can identify the tracks well, and you go out there and you look at that running track,
you'll see that they're wider, they're further apart, and when they run, they dig that hoof into the ground and spray dirt everywhere. So you can see that. If you look real close at the details sometimes, you can see where that running track is spraying that dirt, and those tracks will be splayed. They'll look really big because the deer's putting more pressure on its hooves as it's running. But a walking track is a nice clean impression with not a lot of dirt splayed out because they're relaxed and they're just easing through the woods. There'll be a consistent gait between each track. I don't know how far apart that is. I mean, somebody with more experience could probably tell you. You could probably find it on the Google if you looked into it enough. But man, if we find those walking tracks like that coming in and out of a bedding area, that's the ticket. But it's starting to rain. Me and Zach got to head to the car before we get these cameras wet. But hopefully those tips help you all out. If you get out and do some scouting this summer, hopefully you find something good and have success this fall. See ya.